Welcome everybody to our final Members Presents presentation for 2018. We've done 11 of them this year. We started in February, and this is maybe our largest, I'd have to count everybody, but maybe our largest group so far, like right up there with it. We've had about 28, 30 people before, so we're excited to have everybody here, and I'm also interested to know how everybody, because I see a lot of new faces, so I'm also interested to know how everybody found out about it. We can talk about that later. We have an exciting presentation to end the year with, but first, just wanted to call everybody's attention to two things. One of them is our ECI Holiday Potluck, which is also our annual meeting that we have every year, and it's going to be on Sunday here at the Southwest School of Art, not in this building, but at the Santikos building, which is across the street at the new campus of Southwest School of Art, and everybody's invited to that. And if you already are on the email list, you probably got the invite there, and if not, there's some information right there, and it's a potluck, so come for, festive, like jolly gathering and good eats, and talking about Earthen Construction, getting to nerd out on that. And then the other thing, if everybody could just take out their phones and go to their YouTube app real quick, or on their browser. And we were trying to get it pulled up on here, but we weren't getting it figured out with the Wi-Fi and the computer. But if you could just go to our YouTube channel and follow it or like it, so that this video, once it goes up, you'll see it and you'll have it for posterity. And you'll also have access to all the other videos that we put up there. So we put these on for free, and we're able to do that just because of all the effort that we put into it, and also because of the Southwest School of Art, who donates a space to us every month, and also because of all the awesome presenters who donate their time and expertise to come and share that with us, and also to James, who has taken on a big role in actually like videotaping these and putting them on our site. So we have an awesome ECI videographer for that. So thanks again. And I'm Lorraine. I'm the Vice President of Earthen Construction Initiative. Stephen Colley is our president right there. And then we have Christine Westerman. She's our treasurer. She's also going to be presenting. Beverly Donahue is our secretary. And then we have Celia and we have Ron, who are on the board as well. So if you want to talk to anybody about the goings on with the organization and getting involved, we're here. So anyway, without further ado.
I think I'm your longest serving.
That's what my boss. I thought you were my boss. But one other point I would like to make is that our illustrious president, Stephen Colley, in ill-advised email invite, mentioned best practices. So I will give one best practice, that is, do not come to a 20-minute Mammoth Earth demonstration. Go out and spend a bunch of your hard-earned money trying to build a structure based on that, please, okay? We're going to try to touch on all the bases of Mammoth Earth, not just packing a little wall, but we will do that. We're going to touch on mixed design, we're going to touch on material sourcing, we're going to touch on form work, we're going to touch on testing, and et cetera, et cetera. We're going to do that all in 20 minutes, okay? She's going to keep time. So as long as I've been doing this, I've heard people in the business say we do in a matter of hours what it takes Mother Nature, millennia to do, and we say child's play, 20 minutes, we're going to knock this out. We are going to have to make a couple of adjustments to the standard process. One of the big choke points is mixing. Keenan is going to be busy over here mixing some soil. We could have just pre-blended the soil all together and skipped this step, but in Texas at least 90% of the work is still being specced with some form of stabilizer, usually Portland cement. That's a choke point. We didn't want to cheat on the demonstration, so what he has is our mix, which I will describe later. What I have is a 6% Portland blend. This has all been weighed out ahead of time. And it's critical that the dry mixing happens. If this cloud drifts your way, please don't breathe. It shouldn't last longer than 4 or 5 minutes. Okay. So soil sourcing. In Texas, you've got a few options, really. The easiest, fastest way to do anything is to just go ahead and start okay? The easiest thing is to go to a limestone quarry and specify a particular crush, get it delivered. They're really abundant. They're all over the hill country. Limestone has several problems, same problems it has in any other kind of limestone construction. Just got staining, it's a soft stone, etc., etc., etc. There are granitic residual soils all over the hill country as well. They come from the Llano uplift almost exclusively, but they flow downstream, and you can find them here and there all over the hill country. The soil blend we're using today is a granitic residual mixed with a red clay sand. Those come from all over south and east of San Antonio. If you've ever seen Behanus, the name Behanus on a brick, you've seen the name Behanus on the map. The reason they put Behanus brick in Behanus was because there's these huge deposits of this brilliant red clay sand down there, and that's another one. Our gold standard is site sourcing. We like to go out and find it. You can click to the next screen. Some of the resources we have for finding that. Keenan is busy dry mixing. Oh, I didn't do the proper introduction. Christine on keyboards over here. Keenan's working percussion, and she's also the brains of the outfit. Okay, so we look at three things. The geological map of the state of Texas gives us an idea of parent material. We overlay watershed map, which is what you see in the upper left-hand corner on that. That narrows it down a little bit. If you're looking for downstream stuff, that's important for clays. If you're looking for site soil, ready? Okay, that's right. We don't usually get to use our fingers. There's much more complicated equipment. And Keenan's a little colorblind, so he sometimes thinks it's ready when it's not completely ready. But we will start hydrating anyway. And then the U.S. Department of Agriculture kindly puts out these highly detailed. Can you hydrate for me?
Yes.
Kindly puts out these detailed soil maps, which, if you cross-reference all three of those together, you go out into the field. It's surprising that how well you can predict what you will find, but in the end it boils down to a lot of shovels and a stack of these. These are sequential sieves. You can do in-field sieve analysis. You can quantify the soil that's out there. You have to have enough to do your project on site, or if not, you can find a site close by where you can find enough material from the site. Why don't you hydrate now, please? Okay. Just keep this right. Okay. So, one of the things that happens, the reason why we had to do this ahead of time is because since we're using Portland as a stabilizer, and though best practice would dictate you do not stick your hands into raw Portland cement, it's highly alkaline, and I'll probably have some irritation afterwards. But once the Portland once water hits the pile with Portland cement in it, you really have about 45 minutes to get the material into the forms and place. So when you're out there on a big job site and you're using an extensive formwork system, it's kind of bang, 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 bang at this point. We're going to have plenty of time to do this here now. Just bear with us. This takes time. I told you it was a choke point. What is the next slide anyway? I can talk while I do this. Forms. Forms come in all shapes and sizes. My very favorite forms. That one up in the left-hand corner. Some variant of that has been used in the Middle East for a very long time. The history of rammed earth actually goes back as far as we can tell. The first ones are in Asia, around the Yangtze River. It's 7,000 years old that we know of. There's advanced techniques evidenced by the archaeological record there. But in the Middle East, they perfected very tall buildings with it. Okay, hold on a second. A lot of times people will use concrete forms. A lot of times people use concrete forms. We see these big heavy pieces of steel on the side. If you're not all that bright, you spend your first 5 years worth of revenue building hundreds, if not thousands of those, and buying miles of steel tubing, and you end up with something that the bottom right-hand picture over there looks like. We're not there. No. What do we forget to do, Tina? We were going to give you guys a color stripe in the middle, but we can dry mix now, and we can no longer add the dye. We can try it. I can't promise how it's going to turn out, but yeah. Oftentimes, because we didn't want to cheat you, oftentimes rammed earth gets specified with heavy striations of colors. That can be accomplished with different soil blends, although in Texas our palette is fairly limited. And so, more often than not, it's an ochre pigment. Synthetic pigments don't work because the environment is too alkaline. There. How wet do you get it? Well, it's drier than you would think. It looks about like that when it goes into the form. There's this test, keeps drying. There's this test that is referenced widely in the literature. It's called the ball drop test, where you take dirt like this, ball it into a ball like that, and you drop it from waist height onto a hard surface, and if it splats in a particular way, it's wet enough. In the hands of an experienced person who knows the mix, the current mix that he's using, that's good. That has some value. That is a standalone, judge of whether it's hydrated or not. Sing it with me, Keenan?
It's pretty much crap.
It's pretty much crap as a test. There's a lot of reasons for that. There will be time for questions afterwards. If I get a little too far ahead of you, just pedal faster. I got like 12 minutes and change now. I don't know.
You're exactly right, 12 minutes and change.
Okay. These are the forms we're using today. Big wall we're building, right? Vital tool. Why is it a vital tool? Well, if you put more than 8 inches in a big form, if you use more than 8 inches in a big form, you're going to be using a tamper build, kind of like this, hitting 800 beats a minute. But if you put more than 8 inches in, even this beastie here will not compact the material sufficiently to get what your structural engineers were expecting you to get. So you have to measure carefully, and because rammed earth has that wavy look, you have to measure to the top of the form, not to the bottom of the form. We'll go ahead and let some in. Measure. He's going to measure to the uncompacted surface. He knows what the measurement is, but it's a good show. Okay, and then I'll work for you. Since my hands are moving. Today, because Southwest was funny about, the Southwest School Board was funny about us bringing in a huge compressor and running diesel fumes in a small confined space with people that might sue them, we're using a hand tamper. Several hand tampers, actually. So you do two measurements. Uncompacted, first you place the material, then the compacted measurement. That has to happen all the way around the form, because if you only get one soft spot, it's bad news. Because when this stuff has to come out of forms, that's a nightmare. Okay. So this is an ASTM slide hammer. It has a very specific weight. It has a very specific fall height. It has a very specific diameter. It has a very specific material that it's made of. So we know it's compacted to a certain point, and it'll be ready to go. Really, by the way it feels, and people will tell you that when it's right in the forms, if you're standing in the forms, it rings. Keep in mind, these people are just smart enough to be standing in forms with this beast going, hitting 800 times a minute without air protection, and they hear ringing. Yeah? So, judge that one for yourself. Okay. Next one. So, when you get around the edges, one of these helps, or a 2x4, which I've done. Okay, mix design. He's going to be doing this for a while. He's going to, we're going to do some. We're going to try it. Why not? This should have happened when it was dry, and we should have split it out, and we didn't. This is an iron oxide pigment produced locally. It will not mix all that well because it's already wet, but it'll probably mix well enough to show some kind of line in the form. Just keep going. Take a minute. When we do this in the field, there's a variety of ways we load it. Skid steer, you can ignore that stuff. skid steers, conveyors, bucket brigade, cement buckets off of cranes. A lot of that has to do with the site that you're on. The easiest is if you can build a ramp or provide a surface where you can get a front end loader to dump the material in there. Again, you're working against the clock here. Once that Portland hits, there's nothing you can do to stop the chemical reactions from happening. If you let it go longer than the 45 minutes, essentially what you're doing is building an unstabilized rammed earth wall. Okay, got that? Mixed design. 1.0. Okay, we don't have time for the whole deal, so we're getting mixed design 0.1 here. While Keenan taps away. Particle size distribution. This is a Noble Pilsner jar chock full of large particles, which is to say, not very full at all, right? Same Noble Pilsner jar. 4 balls, 75 marbles. Same Noble Pilsner jar. Same 4 balls, same 75 marbles, 350 plus airsoft BBs. You get the idea, right? Particle size distribution dictates potential density, and density is the best, or certainly one of the best predictors we have of overall strength of the wall. There are other factors that matter. We're going to get to them right about now, but think of this. This is why we do particle size distribution tests. Next. Angularity. Everybody can kind of figure out that it's easier to stack a bunch of boxes than it is to stack a bunch of balls, I'm guessing. It says facets and edges are our friends. These two mixes have the same particle size distribution. Same mass. When I say same, they're, I'm being fairly precise here. We weighed them. We checked the particle size distribution. The only significant difference between them, the same compactive effort, which is to say I put them both in the bucket and screwed the lid on. The only significant difference is this one was selected for angularity, this one was not. Facets and edges are your friends. Okay? No matter what happens to this wall later, it's a stronger wall than this wall. That basically covers angularity in the bucket. And next, clay content. I told you we're playing the hits here. Clay is a marvelous, complicated material which we do not have near enough time to do justice to. We'll put the top one. It affects a wall both as a binder, as a very small particle. There are electrical forces involved. There are hydration forces involved. It's a phase change material. If it's not too polluted with stabilizers, it moderates the humidity coming into and out of the wall and helps earthen walls do what they do best. In general, it's just wonderful stuff. How much clay? Well, you'll see if you look into literature all kinds of pictures that look a lot like this. Well, actually, in the pictures, the stratifications will be much more noticeable, and they'll tell you that on the bottom you have your sand and gravel, and above that you have a layer of silt. Above that you have a layer of clay, and then if it hasn't been disturbed for a while, you'll get clear water above that. And by measuring that, you can tell the clay thing. As a standalone test for gauging whether or not you've got enough clay, it is Keenan.
Pretty much crap.
It's pretty much crap. This clay and this clay are exactly the same amount, okay? This is refined clay that if I add to gravel and put in sand and gravel and put into a jar and shake it up, and I were to put this into a jar and shake it up, they would look like the identical amount of clay. Inside a wall, inside a wall, the reality is if you're using any kind of material gleaned from around, you won't get the clay processed to this amount. So the jar test, because it puts this into solution, it over-represents the amount of clay that you're dealing with. What you need to know is essentially how much available clay you have, and the tests to do that are a whole lot more complicated than we have time to get into now. But one thing that you can't get away from is they all involve a lot of assumptions, and a lot of what you think of as your knowledge, so you have to go back and you have to do repeated testing. I unfortunately forgot to bring the testing apparatus, or I would show you that. Thank God for senility. Wait, is it still? No, it's not full. I'll lift here.
We have plenty of time. We gotta wait.
What is this? What is this, like Friday afternoon? Jeez, it's so hard to find good help. They're not paying them. Okay, so you'll see behind you sort of an ideal range that people are trying to hit when they get to this, the soil compositions. Again, it's important to know what you're aiming for, but it's important to know realistically what you've got to, how the material that you're using with is going to react. All that said, you can build, render houses out of some pretty, iffy soil. People are saying, well, these things have been around forever, and they didn't think about all this stuff, and that's true. And anyone who's been around me has heard me say it 1,000 times. We are looking at a very highly biased sample, namely the ones that survive. For every old earthen structure standing today and in use, there are untold thousands that fell to the ground a long time ago for a whole variety of reasons. Some of them bulldozers and developers, but some of them just bad things. We can't take buildings that have been here for 1,000 years, look at them and say, oh, earthworks, all earthworks because these ones lasted. That doesn't even make sense if to a 5-year-old once you put it that way. TikTok. Oh, okay. What's that? 2 minutes. I think we're gonna make it. This will be a record, by the way. And also, you should know this has never been. This is the first time. This hasn't been run through. So, guinea pigs. Okay. There you go. So this is the process. Normally, the little form, the little red brick wall, that's the size sample we would normally make for an architectural project. You can see them tamping it in the center left picture. The bigger walls, those are the forms in place, and you see loading and going on. The mixing, what we were doing with the little hose and the hydration is not much different if you're using a skid steer. There are other ways to mix it. Volumetric trucks work on large projects. There's about 7 different ways that you can mix it in bulk. Again, if it's a lime or an unstable, if it's lime stabilized or unstabilized, you have a lot more time. You can do a lot more thorough job of mixing, and you can take a lunch break. But when you're dealing with Portland as we are, you don't have that luxury. Okay. Woo! Look at that. Okay. Go ahead. We're about to see the reveal.
Did you want to mention about the chamfer?
Oh, well, there's chamfer in there. We made it pretty on the good call, baby.
While it's being undone, could you go into a little bit more about angularity? Is that a particle angularity like manufactured sand, which is easier to compact because of the angles, or is it something else?
It's the particle angularity, and specifically the way that they grab them. You can, like I said, it's a lot easier to stack boxes than it is to stack balls. Well,
Right.
just because they're not boxes doesn't change the fact that angles and facets grab each other. And so you can get much better strengths out of an angular mix than you can out of a well-rounded mix. So an angular sand, for instance, is a plaster sand,
Right.
or like a white marble sand or something like that, something that's designed for that purpose. Beach sands tend to be really well-rounded, river sands tend to be well-rounded. And you can fudge around certain size particles if you're diving into it, you can fudge around it, as long as you've got things that will grab it and do it well. Again, it doesn't matter most of the time, but if you're...
So sand is the variable on increasing or decreasing?
Not just sand, all the aggregates should be as sharp as is reasonably practical. And you need to factor that in. It's helpful to an engineer if he has something reliable that he can count on as far as compressor strength and tensile strength, etc., etc.
Reveal.
Right?
If you have a...
Okay. There you go. Hi.
Oh, the chamfers.
And the chamfers. Now that'll dry out to a pretty pink color.
What's a cure time on that?
Different color.
Well, it depends on what you mean by cure. I wouldn't want to let it sit out in a hard driving rain for about 12 hours, but you can pull the forms right away. You can damp cure it, and theoretically, although it's never been proven in a data set that you can damp cure it like you do concrete, but
To maximize the strength of the structure?
There's no evidence that,
Okay.
that not taking that peeling the forms off in this environment does any harm. So anyway, so seriously, any questions?
I have a question on these. You see these in history in dry climates. Obviously, in the swamps of Florida, I don't see any rammed earth walls. Talk about what the impact of moisture is on the wall.
If it's a stabilized mix, the impact is minimized. If it's an unstabilized mix, it's fine in a humid environment if running water. It's erosion from moving particles combined with water that presents a danger to earthen construction. By itself, you're not going to get enough atmospheric humidity to damage an earthen wall. But the minute you introduce water, motion, and particles to it, you can.
There's a wall, a fence on McCullough, south of the railroad tracks in Olms Park. And the wall is beautiful. It's got all those great
Reasonably familiar with that wall.
Yeah, but the top is eroded and the aggregate and the particles because they didn't put a sealer, didn't put a cap or what?
Because the client insisted on not capping the wall. That would be the reason why a particular wall, which I'm fairly familiar with,
Okay.
is falling apart.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. The whole argument I lost a long time ago. Yeah, they need to be capped on top.
Okay.
Yes.
So you mentioned Portland being a time factor. Is the reason Portland's being used as a stabilizer because of code requirements, or is lime as efficient?
I wouldn't say it's as efficient. It doesn't work. It works better in clayey soils and not as well in sandy soils. So it really depends on the type of soil. As far as their ability to protect against erosion, a careful mix design will basically negate any differences in the two. So it really has more to do with the soil that you're starting with.
Your engineer has to be on board.
Yes, your engineer has to. You have to find an engineer that is not scared to death of earthen materials.
If you have a project site and you think that the soil may be suitable, and you scoop up some soil and bring it to someone and test it.
One of the things you have to do is get below the level of organics. You're never going to technically get all the way below organics, but it's what you would see as biologicals. You don't want to see a lot of grass and humus and stuff like that. And once you get below that, yes, you can scoop up there's a very straightforward test that'll tell whether the soil will get you the compressive strength you need. And then beyond that, if there's not enough clay in it, which is one possibility, commercially available quantities of clay are no more expensive than Portland or lime, really, if you buy it in bulk bag, and it can be added. If the soil is not sandy enough, you can add sand to it, you can take your soil and add gravel to it. Most soils, if they're not ready to use off the shelf, can be amended to be able to be used.
How is caliche a good soil?
Caliche it's a fine starting point. It does need to be amended. It needs, generally speaking, to have larger aggregate added to it, and you have to. And given the amount of clay that is often present in caliche, and caliche doesn't have a technical definition that I'm aware of anyway. But it typically has too much clay for Portland to be effective, so it's a good candidate for lime stabilization.
What's the test you're talking about? What kind of a test are you talking about?
For compressive strength, I mean, literally, you can take an ASTM cylinder mold out into the field if you've got soil that you want to see if it will hold together there, and that's your first test. You know, you might screen it out using these, basic sieve run on this, and these fit into 5-gallon buckets. I mean, this is not expensive equipment. And once you have a material that is a largest aggregate size of about 3/8 inch, you would put it into the cylinder mold. You would use, this is not technical, I said it's an ASTM standard. We make our own for a couple of reasons, but it meets every ASTM standard. So but they have one available for like $100 from most lab supply places that you can buy. And you can just use this in the cylinder mold, and you drop this 25 times into the cylinder mold, moving it around. Pull it out, the core will come out, and you can test that core for compressive strength. Yeah.
As far as start and stop point from one day to the next on your walls, do you have to have Can you stop at any point, or do you have to finish the wall from
But
top?
no, best practice would be to crown the last lift that you do, and that goes out the window if you have a wide overhang. In other words, if it's a roofed area. If it's an area and a stabilized wall that's going to get a lot of driving water, you don't want to slope inward. And there's not a lot of evidence, if there is any evidence, that it actually presents a problem, but just logic tells you you would crown the center of the wall. That's what you do.
What do you mean by crown?
Higher in the center and a little lower at the edges. When you're in the form and you're tamping, you have a lot of ability to push material around. For instance, you know if the architect wants more, like a more flat look or a more wavy look, you know, the people that are running the tampers develop a feel for where they start tamping and where they finish tamping. So if you were looking to crown the center of a wall, you know, you would rather than making sort of a blind blanket pass, which is fairly random usually, typically, you would focus on the outside edges and get that a little more compacted before you moved in. And when you finish up, you're going to end up with a subtle crown towards the center.
So like what would be the difference?
Oh, just you don't want water theoretically running through it. To me, it's silly because what's going to draw water through a wall like that is capillary action, not gravity. If gravity is getting it through there, you did something. I mean, you got a bigger problem than a little bit of water ending up on the inside of your house. So.
I guess, are they typically or always on a concrete slab?
They need to be on some kind of foundation that will support their weight, and typically that needs to be concrete. But a slab is not only is it not always, but I would love to see them go away entirely. Rubble trenches and grade beams work just beautifully for rammed earth construction. It needs to have enough tensile strength to support, to keep the earthen structures of all types have very little in the way of tensile or flexural strength, So basically a good foundation limits the amount of movement that the wall has to absorb.
Is there a maximum square footage of area before you need to have either reveal joints or expansion joints or control joints?
There are formulas by which we determine the extent to which we can minimize the possibility of cracking, but there are very large structures that don't use them, and there's techniques for dealing with them if they do. Some people just elect not to use them.
Can you make some comparisons between the rammed earth and adobe or other kinds of construction?
As far as how they perform in what way?
Whatever.
Typically, rammed earth, because it's, in my opinion, it's overstabilized. There's too much use of stabilizers, and the science isn't good for how that affects the indoor air quality issues. Not that it's going to contaminate the indoor air quality, but it just doesn't take full advantage of the clay if it's loaded up on stabilizers. Adobes tend not to be stabilized, except that sometimes people will put asphalt emulsion in, which is weird to me. I don't think that there is enough good science. If there is, I'm certainly not aware of it to give a head-to-head comparison. One of the things ECI is trying to do as an organization is improve the science so that we can actually say with some authority, and we're not snake oil salesmen out there saying, hey, this is going to make your life better in all these ways if we can't back it up.
Mixed design applies to all of them.
Yeah, mixed design applies to all of them. Compressed earth blocks are by far the most forgiving because they are both compressed, they can be stabilized, and they're modular. So those three things all work in favor of compressed earth blocks. Adobes are modular, and that helps a wall deal with changes, and it also makes it more repairable. Rammed earth, you kind of have to get right because it's cast in stone, literally, when you're finished with the wall. So you've got to get everything right, from the windows, doors, window placements, volume displacement devices, all that. So rammed earth is a much more challenging and less forgiving from a construction point of view.
What about in terms of temperature, like inside temperatures?
Again, the data just isn't there for us to know. We would love for it to be one day to have a good data set to reference. There are some numbers out there, but I'm not confident in them. So.
I've heard some stories that when people say that the construction schedule is really difficult related to cost to do.
It needs to be planned for. It can't be. There needs to be early engagement of your rammed earth crews if you're going to have a rammed earth crew. It doesn't have to be the construction choke point that typically it is, and if you involve the professionals in the process early, all that can be avoided. You can put these walls up, you see it pretty fast. I mean, we got a little bit done in 20 minutes. That little sample wall that we showed there, that was one batch of cement. It was done in about 30 minutes, maybe total. But, you know, when you've got conveyors going and you've got multiple tamping crews and you've got mixers spitting this stuff out, we can get the material into the forms, get it compacted fast, so you can do it. What you can't do is build it like you build every other building and have it, you know, just say, hey, the foundation's gonna be done on this day. We expect the plumbers to be on there a week later. You know, that kind of, it just needs more coordination to avoid those kind of log jams. That's it? Good, okay. Thank you.
I'd like to thank y'all for coming. We do need to clear the room out well, sometime a little bit after 8 o'clock, you know, so they can, all the people here can go home. But please hang around, ask questions, and anything you want to know about Earthen Construction Initiative, please ask any one of us. We'll be more than happy to help you out. Thank you, Robert, for coming. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next month. Next month, we will likely have a meeting on the 8th, not the 1st.